What's happening, friends and family, patrons and listeners, happy campers and Chardonnay drinkers? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of The Precipice of Delusion. I am Julian Gavilanis. I am the host of this here show, and I appreciate you being here. Wow. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry it's been a little while. I've been preoccupied with a lot of things that I have been prioritizing in my life. So if it seems like I haven't been consistent with the podcast, that's true. And it's not because I don't love doing this. It's not because I can't find guests. It's not because of anything really, besides the fact that I'm just really busy in other areas. And at this point, this podcast does take time and effort and energy. And I just have a few other things that I have been putting in front of it in the interim. And I apologize to anybody who's been tuning in regularly to listen to these episodes, because I know that they make you happy, and I appreciate you appreciating them. So thank you for that. And again, apologies for the delay in these consistent weekly episodes. I'm moving through my own experience. I have, since moving to this new spot, signed with a new manager. We have been working our asses off, and I have had a lot of opportunities come up, which has been so wonderful. It's been a really weird season, a really weird year, a really weird few years, to be quite honest, in the acting industry. And so it's just such a relief to have a solid rep on my team who I just actually connect with, can communicate with, can get along with and talk to on a regular basis, and not feel afraid to reach out to, or afraid that they're not going to get back to me. It's a very cool relationship, rad open line of communication, and opportunities are starting to come, which is making me very excited. But, I still want to prioritize my own creative work. And so here I am back at it, doing it again. So thank you for taking the time. I know I'm not great at sharing everything that's going on in my life, but who is, who really does that kind of stuff? Who's out there? I guess there are people, but that seems tough. I'm doing my best to show up and make this thing work for you. But if you're here because you want to listen to Jon Lampley on this episode and you've never tuned in before, I implore you to check out a couple of the other episodes, hear what we got going on here, hear what this podcast is all about. We have a good time in here. We talk about all of the things that the artists have to go through in order to stay in this wild ecosystem of a business. How do they maintain their self-worth? How do you stay in it when the universe tells you to get the hell away? How do you pick yourself up after you've been, quote unquote, rejected so many times, and keep going? Because I think ultimately that's the relative component in all of this, is that you just it's just persistence, right? You just have to keep going. You just have to keep practicing. You just have to keep trying, and you have to keep getting better. And I am my own example of that. I always think that when you're in it, you can't tell how far you've gotten, right? But when you're able to really kind of pull back and look at your life objectively and recognize how far you've actually come, you can say, wow, I've stuck with this acting thing for 15 years. And I am definitely 15 years farther into this than I would have been if I started today. And so I have so much more wisdom. I have so much more insight. I have so much more knowledge than I ever did. And it's constantly growing. And I'm so grateful for that. And I think that anybody else who is, struggling or trying to figure out their way through their own career, or battling through the unknown of what they want to do, or, the uncertainties of life, it's just, it's really special to know what you want to do with your life, but it also comes with its own challenges. My friend Laura and I recently were chatting about that, and you know, um, for me to have acting and to know that like I have this purpose in my life is such a blessing, but it also comes with this stress of like, well, now I have to execute that thing, and if I don't execute that thing, I'm going to feel inadequate. Uh, and cue the precipice of delusion. This is where this whole podcast comes from. And sometimes I admire people that just have contentment in their situation and don't have that like burning drive to figure out what they need to do. And you know every experience that we're in has its own hangups. So whether you know what you're doing or you don't know what you're doing, it comes with its own hardships. And so I just hope that whatever you are doing, however you are living right now, you are practicing having a little bit of gratitude about the fact that you're just here, and simply that you just have like uh, a universe around you that provides the nutrients and minerals that you need to get up and keep going. And with that, try to just maybe push yourself to have a little bit more fun. Why not? Huh? I'm doing that. Anyways, guys, we got Jon Lampley on the show today. Jon Lampley, what a legend! I'm so honored. He's a magical human being. He is a trumpet player extraordinaire. He is in the band Huntertones. He's also in the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He's there in their horn section there, and has just played with every band. I met him originally playing for Alan Stone. He plays with O.A.R. He's played every single venue in the world. He plays with Lawrence, the band. He plays with I don't know, everybody. I mean, he's just one of those guys that everybody knows. He's a New York fella who lives in New York and practices and has his home base here, and just gets around and is just a beloved human being. I actually got to sit in on his live recording of his debut album called Night Service, which is at this really, really special bar called Bar Lunatico in Brooklyn, where, there's probably only like 75 people in the room. And I was lucky enough to be one of them. And man, it was a really transcendent experience. We get into it. And if you haven't heard, or if you aren't familiar with Jon's music, go check him out. Listen to the Huntertones, listen to Night Service, download it, stream it, do whatever you want to do. He is really a unique and kind of fascinating individual. His story and the origin of it kind of comes from the church, and how he came to be is pretty extraordinary. And I just admire him so much. Somebody who really figured it out and is continuously figuring it out and continuously working on himself through that pursuit, because we need that. And so really grateful to have gotten the chance to talk to him. I just get so pleased every time I'm in his space. And so I will keep you no longer, and we can get into this episode right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce you to my good pal, Jon Lampley. I've been jamming to Night Service for, well, really since it kind of came out and became something that I could listen to regularly. And God, man, I feel so privileged to have been somebody who was actually one of the few people to be in that room during that live recording.
Man.
And something, I don't know, man. It's like, I guess like I'm kind of curious about you and your story and having you here, because something happened to me, and I don't say this loosely at all, but when I was in that space and I was experiencing your music while recording Night Service, and every time that I've seen you at Lunatico and performing that show specifically, and I've told you this before, but there's something that happens to me spiritually that I haven't experienced before in my life. And obviously, like, there's an affiliation with like your experience with church, and you're bringing that to Night Service and how you kind of like put that out into the world. But it's in a way that connects to somebody like myself who hasn't been able to connect to spirituality and faith and God ever in my life. And something about what you're able to cultivate in that space brought me there. And out of all the other, like, I've gone to many concerts in my life, and maybe concerts are the place where I feel closest to that. Music is what brings me closest to that thing. But you specifically, what you brought me closer to like God than I feel like I've ever been through you. And I'm curious how do you do that? Like, where does that come from? Because you obviously grew up in the church, but like, yeah, it's something that like just it's pouring out of you, and it's so incredible. And I don't understand it fully, and I don't understand really what my experience is outside of just like what it is. And I'm curious, kind of like how you're able to cultivate that and put that out into the world the way you do.
Man, first of all, thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you were in the room that night, as well as, you know, anybody else who was there. It's a really building Night Service from like, you know, the beginning. I've been very fortunate to play in a lot of really amazing bands,
Yeah.
or to play within the bands of really amazing artists. You know, our mutual friend Alan Stone is definitely one of them. A band called Huntertones, a band called O.A.R, and the Late Show Band. Like, all of these bands that I've been a part of and get to contribute to have been really special. But Night Service is the first thing that is like completely mine. You know, conceptually, not just choosing the music, writing the music, arranging the music, but also just like kind of what you're alluding to, this idea of bringing something that is, or at least attempting to bring something that feels like it is above the plane of just, you know, physical interaction, music in a room at a bar, trying to kind of really bring a spiritual thing into the space, because I feel like that is kind of who I am. Like, the most genuine piece of myself is like when I make music, I feel like I'm tapping into this sort of spiritual plane, and I believe that it is God working through me. Like, I feel like regardless of who I am playing with or who I am playing for, I feel like making music for people, in front of people, is like genuinely why I was created. And so to get to kind of actually to say like, all right, this is going to be my version of what that is a really special thing. And I'm extremely grateful for everybody that was there in the room the first time that was officially captured on wax, as they say. But man, to the idea of like, how do you do that, or how, you know, my own relationship with how I grew up, and the Christian faith that I grew up to believe, but not just the idea of the faith, but the culture within which I was immersed in, all of these things are very integral to who I am. Like growing up in Akron, Ohio, my life was really interesting because it was like we lived in a small town outside of Akron called Talmadge, Ohio, which was kind of like a real tiny suburb where it was mostly white. We were one of the only black families that was there, especially when I was young. It was like there were definitely not a lot of black families and black people that lived in Talmadge. So the school that I grew up in, a lot of my friends at school, the environments that I was in Monday through Saturday were predominantly white spaces. But then the church that I grew up in from when I was like young was an all black church in Akron, and the environment, the music, the interactions were completely a different space than the space that I was existing in on Monday through Saturday. So growing up, there was always this really interesting like duality of like Sunday where I would be around my church friends and like the musicians at church and the energy of that and the, you know, the doctrine of that, like hearing the preacher preach and seeing people react and kind of really loving the way that praise leaders or the choir leader would be able to literally like kind of pay attention to what the spirit of the room is and then like speak or sing in a way that kind of like brings that spirit, like facilitates that spirit in the way that it needs to be facilitated in the moment. And so growing up watching that happen and feeling very visceral about it as I was also playing music, kind of being like, wow, like I really like that, or I connect with that, or I want to be able to channel that. I want to be able to pay attention to the spirit that's happening in a room and through my music or through my actions kind of facilitate that, enhance that, allow people in the room to experience that. While on the other end, Monday to Saturday, you know, I was at school and all of my friends were listening to Semi-Charmed Kind of Life or Wonderwall. And it was like this totally different world that was also like influential to like who I was and the type of music that I liked and listened to. And then I feel like getting away from, you know, my hometown, going to college and eventually moving to New York, I really started to have questions and thoughts about the way that I grew up, what I grew up believing, specifically in terms of just the overwhelming idea of like, well, this is what we do and what we study in this version of Christianity is like, this is right. This is the way. We don't necessarily question anything. When we have questions, inevitably, which we will because we are humans who have brains and think about things. And I started to be surrounded by a lot of different types of people once I moved away from home, particularly when I got to New York. And it really started to kind of make me question how I grew up. And I never fell away from my belief in God, in kind of the tenets of the faith that I grew up in. But the idea of like, well, this is the way, and anybody who is not following this specific thing, we're trying to get them to follow this specific thing, because if not, even if they're wonderful or whatever, they're lost. And I really started to struggle with this idea that like, there is like, we know that this is the one way and that this is the one path. And so I think, again, as I started to travel around the world playing music and just to kind of exist and be surrounded around like by a lot of people, I started to want to figure out what I believed or how I believed. And I still feel like I'm in the process of trying to pin it down. And I don't know if it is an exact thing, but I think what I do believe is, or what I've come to is like, I'm okay with maybe not knowing exactly what is the way or
Mm.
what is the definitive, like, this is it. And it's like, it's impossible to know,
Right.
regardless of how much I believe on this book or believe in things that I have been taught, or like even like in the things that I feel like I've seen and felt. It's genuinely impossible to know, you know, in a certain way, but kind of accepting that, and then
Mm.
um allowing that to be a part of the faith, because then it's like, well, I can believe what I believe and what I experience. And if that also includes this element of like accepting the fact that I'm not going to understand every element of God or every element of spirituality because it's too big, or like every element of like what is right or what is wrong, or why things happen or why they don't happen, or what's going to happen to us when we go, like accepting the fact that it is impossible to understand all of that has really kind of helped me come to terms with being more comfortable in the faith. All of that being said, when I
Mm.
started to do my own music, it it wasn't like I sat down and I was like, all right, this has to be something that is like touching the the church. It just kind of came out of me very naturally. It was like the
Mm-hmm.
music that I wanted to do, that was most inherent in me, was music that was adjacent to the gospel music, that is the earliest music that I was hearing and kind of is the center of the way that I play and sing. But also the experience of night service itself, it was like the first time I was on a microphone at the center of the thing, and the way that um the words or the music or the playing came out of me very naturally was very similar to like the ministers or like
Mm-hmm.
singers that I saw at church, where it's not just about like, let me play for you and hope that you enjoy it. It's let me generate a spirit of joy, a spirit of gratitude, a spirit of thankfulness, maybe sometimes a spirit of solemn reflection. Pay attention to what that spirit is doing in the room, and then let, like, what I believe, like, let God kind of move through me in terms of like how I am trying to sing or how I am trying to connect with an audience. And what I've found is a lot of people have kind of expressed the sentiment that you've expressed, where it's like, man, like, I've never been to church in my life, or I've never connected with God, or like I haven't been to church in so many years, but like I came in here and I felt very emotional because it felt like I was able to connect with God or tap into that space, but in a way that was removed from maybe some negative feelings that I've had attached to that thing. And
Mm.
when you're able to just kind of, at least for me, when I'm able to tap into that via playing the music and being on the performing side of the experience, it's almost it like it's felt like a healing thing for me, because I definitely feel close to God when I'm doing night service, when we're playing, and it feels like a closeness that has taken a long time for me to kind of get back to, after feeling some frustrations and anxieties about a lot of the pieces of how I was raised. So night service is on, like, the fact that other people feel that makes me grateful, because I think that it is like been a journey for me to kind of work through some of the things that I have dealt with, but also to discover like genuinely who I am, not just in faith, but like as an artist and as a musician. And so
Yeah.
for the first thing for me to do as an artist to be something that is so personal, it brings me a lot of joy that people, and people enjoy the music, but also that they are kind of having this sort of experience where they feel closer to God. They feel whatever's happening in that spiritual realm, because that is
Yeah.
a part of what I'm trying to do with that project, almost subconsciously, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can't really. Can you even try? Is
Right.
it something that you can even like attempt to do, or does it just have to happen through you?
I think that it's the effort is in, uh writing the music putting together a band that understands the vision, but also the tradition of the various music, of doing the project regularly to kind of build familiarity with the music and to allow it to feel more natural. But like you, it's like every time we do it, every time I do the show, it's like I think about it during the week, we rehearse, and then as soon as I like enter the stage, it's almost like, all right, I'm gonna let go of all of that, and it's just gonna be like, I want to be like an open container that like the water is just like flowing through, and it's, if I feel like if I were to try to be like, all right, well, this one now I'm gonna tap into this type of emotion. It's just like the vehicles of the songs are there, and once I enter the space, it's just like, let me turn the faucet on and let this thing move through me and see how it is affecting people, and then use that to kind of indicate, okay, where does it need to go, or what is another type of song that needs to happen in the future to kind of add to or facilitate another thing. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
it
man.
is very like, a lot of effort goes into kind of the logistics of the
Of
art,
course.
but once I'm there, I really do try to turn off that part of my brain and just let the experience flow through me, and people kind of, I think people experience it in that way as well.
It's very clear that you've put in the work to get to a space where you're able to shut off whatever intentionality of like presenting a performance in a specific way is going to happen. Like it's clear that when you're up there and you're doing that thing, you're in the space that an artist is working their whole life to try and reach, which is that connectivity to the thing. And it's like the hard work to do. You've done all the work your whole life. You've gone through all the struggles and all the sacrifices and everything to get to this space where like now I can't. I wonder, like, is it just easy at that point when you're up there? Like, does it just feel like it's like no work being done whatsoever because it's just kind of happening for you?
I mean, I would never say that easy is the word, because even when something, we with particularly musicians or athletes or even like writers or poets and performers, actors, we see them do what they do, and a word that comes out is like effortless, or like you make it look so, it looks so easy. And while the goal is to feel like what you are doing is coming very natural, there is still effort being exerted in a way that is like, I don't want to say it's up there and it's easy. I think natural is a word though. Like it feels like, when I am doing night service, and I try to feel this way not just about my project and my music,
Right.
but any setting that I'm playing music in, the amount of preparation that has gone into the instrument over time, but the specific music is so much that when I am on stage, it is extremely natural, even if at times it's like, oh, well, this passage is difficult, or like if I want to reach for this thing, I know that it's going to take effort to get there, but it's happening in a way that is natural and not in a way that feels forced because of the amount of preparation that happens leading into it. But it's also like, and this is for night service, it's like a lot of people are like, man, like you have like almost like a minister type energy up there. It's like, how, and it's like, for me, I watched people do that, and I felt people do that from like before I knew the whole alphabet. And so there are certain things where it's like, I wouldn't even call it easy, but it's almost just like it's inside of you so
It's part of your
much.
language. Yeah.
Exactly. And when you just kind of create the circumstances for it to come out, it does come out very naturally, very unpracticed. And I think that there are certain elements of the project that are that, but then there are certain elements of the project that I feel like are more like, like I feel like uh, playing, kind of carrying a project on trumpet and voice was not something that I'd ever done before. So doing that took time. Like when we recorded the record, I had been doing the project at Lunatico semi-regularly for almost 2 years, maybe like a year and a half. And I feel like at the beginning, I remember I got to the end of the show and I was like gassed. I was like, man, because I hadn't been somebody who was like singing on the mic for a lot of a show, or like carrying most of the show with my, like, as the front man. And so that was a part of it that really took time and effort and experience. And I feel like I'm continuing to grow with that, because where, some of the people like the band O.A.R that I've been in for 13 years now, it's like Mark has been a front man since, the 90s. He's been in front of a band singing for 2 hours. So that's something that at this point, it's like he can just do that.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's like that is a part of the thing that is like growing, like that stamina and growing more and more comfortable in that role. But the idea of like looking up, seeing what's happening in the room and being like, oh, okay, let me take it to this place. I've been kind of had experience with that my whole life. So that part of it comes very naturally. But all to say that it feels like it's a combination of like things that feel like they are effortless in the moment because of an amount of experience, but also things that feel like they are becoming effortless because of the repetition of effort that is put into actually creating the thing and doing the thing.
Yeah. When you were growing up and you were getting really serious about music prior to like really making money or being a professional in any of this stuff, I know you talk about some of like the frustrations and the, the fears of, not knowing exactly how to trust that you were going to get where you were going, or like having faith. I've been thinking a lot about faith lately in my own, or the absence of it for myself. And I wonder like if because of how you were raised, there was like with your faith for what you knew or expected yourself to do in your later life, if that kind of like got in the way of your progress, or how you kind of navigated to get into the space that you wound up getting towards. Like, how did you like feel connected to this outside of, like, I imagine if you grow up in the church and you're feeling like, okay, God has my back, like I'm gonna soar towards where I need to be. And if I feel uncertain, then like, it's okay because like God has a plan for me. I've heard that, and I've been scared of that because I feel like, no, I'm in control. I have to create my path. And if I don't do it, nobody else does have my back. And to say like, okay, God does, I feel like, especially at a young age, if you buy into that and then it doesn't happen, like you put all this work in, you put all this effort in, and then like you move to New York and you're like, all right, I've arrived and I'm dope and I'm really good. And then I'm sure there were periods where it was just like, what's going on? Where are you, God? Like, what's going on? And so that like challenges that faith. And I wonder for you, how you continued to trust in yourself and trust in like your own pursuits, and what your relationship with like God was through that period, and how you kind of just like navigated that space to really like stick through it and say, because it's one thing to be talented and to have other people validate you and say, hey, you're really good at that thing, you should keep going. But it's another thing to like keep going when you need to put food on the table and you need to eat and you need to like, figure out how you're going to make a living doing this. Right. And I wonder kind of what the toughest time for you in that period of your life was, maybe prior, or maybe if it's even happening now, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. And kind of like how you trusted in either like yourself or in God or in whatever it was to kind of like move you through that hard time.
Man, I so I have known a lot of people who, uh, whether it be within my own faith or iterations of the Christian faith, friends, ministers, who speak very specifically to like, I quieted myself and I literally like heard the voice of God saying like, this is going to be okay. Or like, like literal, like
Mm-hmm.
conversationally. And I have not had that experience in my life where I feel like it's like I'm going through something or even I'm like praying and it's literally the voice saying like words into my ear. But the way that I feel like God has made himself present in my life is that when I am moving through the world, whether it be like, high school and college, kind of like trying to make decisions about where I want to go to school or like what I want to do, or like moving to New York and kind of getting here and being like, all right, you don't really know that many people. You're here with your two best friends, but like, what do I do? Where do I go? And like throughout my life, consistently, there are people that show up and there is like an intuition of like this is the person that you need to be associated with.
Mm.
These are the people that are going to be a part of the next step of your journey and going to support you, and you're going to support them, are going to help you grow. And it's like literally at different junctures of my life, it's been different people. Like I think about my best friend from childhood, Spencer Cutlip. He showed up in 8th grade to our school, and he was like the first person that I met that was talking about like practicing outside of band and like wanting to play music as like a primary thing.
Mm.
And it was like he literally moved to Talmadge and lived 4 houses down from me. So like, you know what I'm saying? And it's like
Yeah.
became my best friend. And it was like we would just talk music and hang and play all the time. And like that was kind of the beginning seed for somebody like me who grew up in this small town and got good grades and played basketball. And everybody was like, you're going to be a lawyer or a politician. To be like, maybe this thing that comes very naturally to you that you really love is the thing that could be your life. Fast
Right.
forward a couple years later, I go to Ohio State. I'm studying psychology and pre-med, but I'm living in a dorm with a lot of artists and people, and I'm looking around me and I'm inspired by all these people that are pursuing their art for a living. And that feels like it's kind of God weighing on me. And as soon as I make the decision to switch to music, I immediately come into the universe of Dan White and Chris Ott, who are the co-founders of Huntertones, who are the guys that I moved to New York with, who like kind of became the guys who were a huge part of the next, have been a huge part of the next decade of my life. But it's like, it's not that like I heard God being like, hey, go hang out with those guys. It's like within the
Mm.
first 2 weeks of being in music school, there was a small group recital and I sat down and I saw these guys play. And here, it was just like them.
Yeah.
That's who it is. And so to the question that you asked specifically, I just kind of wanted to set it up in that way. I feel like the most difficult time that I had or have experienced, there was a period right after I switched to studying music in college where a lot of the people that had supported me my whole life in whatever it was, my parents in giving me every opportunity in, wanting me to succeed in basketball, in school, and seeing me get this scholarship to Ohio State, when I decided to make the switch to music, to see them genuinely feel afraid. And most of the communicating with me was like, what are you doing? Or like, it feels like you're throwing your opportunities away. And I think over time, I realize that a lot of that is out of love, but it's also really frustrating to feel like people who have supported you are now saying like, you feel like you're like, I found this thing, I've found this purpose. And they're like, that's not it. That was
Mm-hmm.
really hard. And there was a period where it felt like I was practicing so much every day. The people who had initially supported me through my life were very like, what are you doing? And I was just feeling very like it there was a period where it got to me where it was like, bro, like you are throwing your whole life into this thing that like you have no idea what the plan is. You
Yeah.
have no idea. And up until that point, it was like, I don't know what I can't see what the dots are, but I know that this is the path. But there was a very specific, it was my junior year of college. It was like, and a lot of things in life were happening. My dad was starting to get really sick. Um, the first like major relationship that I had entered into had ended because I was dedicating myself to the music. And so the combination of these outside life things and just the uncertainty of what the future would hold for the first time in my life really kind of like made me feel like I was far away from everything. And I can tell you, man, and again, this is kind of why I set it up the way that I set it up. The way that I have experienced God over the course of my life was like winter, fall, it was really bad. That next spring, I'm sorry, was when I got the call as a college student to start touring with this band O.A.R.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, out of the uncertainty, comes this opportunity that is like, yo, this is the path. And it's like, from that point, I feel like moving through the rest of my college experience, moving to New York, everything that happened is like, this is the path. You move to New York, you meet this drummer, Sammy Miller, you get introduced to the kind of Jazz and Lincoln Center music scene. Within a year and a half of living in New York, you're playing with Jon Batiste and about to be in the Late Show band. And it's like, it's just, these are the types of things where I feel like I have felt God kind of moving like in my life, but also just kind of making the path plain. And again, it's not to say that it's like, because I believe a certain thing, all of these opportunities have presented themselves. I think that, I started at the Late Show in 2015. It was kind of the biggest career opportunity that I have had in my life. It has led to the next, I've been there for 9 years now, but it was like literally within months of getting that opportunity, my dad passed away. And it's like, I feel like it's just a lot of like big kind of moments in my career have also been paired with these moments of like struggle or pain. And it's like, through all of it, again, I am extremely thankful, and I thank God for kind of making himself plain in that way. But for me, it's like, I have never, through that point in college, through like, like my dad getting sick, kind of, I've never, at the lowest point of like feeling frustrated over, I've never been able to fully say like, you know what, I don't believe in this thing. I think how I grew up and what I grew up to believe, like, I don't believe in any version of that, and I'm gonna go find something else. It's never been like, I don't believe this. It's been, I question things, but I've always found a source of like hope and support in like, when I'm down, being like, God, like, I know that whether things are great or things are not great or things are difficult, you have my back. Like, and I feel that way collectively about like humanity. It's like, I feel like, believing that, and somebody who believes like God created us and that he loves us, it's like, even though we can't explain why horrible things happen or why wonderful things happen, there is like a solace in knowing that like, no matter where I'm at or like what I'm moving through or like what point of process I'm at in creation or whatever, that like the person who created the world like is genuinely like has your back and like loves you and wants you to succeed. And that's been something that I do think has been a constant source of like, keep going, or a constant source of confidence, or a constant source of like, when I feel anxiety around anything, just kind of having that as a baseline has been something that's been really helpful and guiding for me in life.
Yeah, man, it's really cool because I mean, a lot of really sounds like a lot of really wonderful people have kind of just like shown up in your world, in your orbit, and you have had the wherewithal to say, yeah, that feels right. I'm going to lean in that direction and move with that person, which has led you to that person, which has led you to this thing, which has led you to being on the late night stage, every night for the last 9 years, which must have been such a crazy call to get. I mean,
It was,
at that point, was it even? I mean, of course it was, but like you'd been doing a lot of things prior to that moment as well, right?
man, I mean, at this point, I had been touring with O.A.R for about maybe like 3 years. I just moved to New York. The Radius tour with Alan Stone, I believe,
What a
had
time!
also just, man, what a time. I'm literally looking at a signed poster from the show at the Apollo Theater with like
Oh,
everybody's
cool,
signature
man.
on it, like the band, like all the crew, Bernhoft, and I'm just like, man, that was
Wow.
such a special time in life, man. But
Yeah.
so all of these things were happening, um, and yeah, spring of 2015, it was like basically John's drummer Joe, who has become one of my best friends and who plays drums on Night Service, plays at the Late Show, saw me play one night. I didn't know who he was or like he was in the crowd, and texted John, and he was like, "Hey, I know like, you're thinking about different people to bring into the fold for the Late Show," because basically spring of 2015 was when they announced Stephen Colbert's taking over and Jon Batiste going to be the band leader. Um, but Joe texted John, was like, "There's this guy who's playing trumpet and tuba. He may be like a viable option." And so then
He just saw
Jon
you at a
Batiste
concert. He just saw
just
you
saw me
playing. Like,
just saw me playing,
wow,
man. And it was
cool.
like a couple days later, I got an email from Jon Batiste's team that was like, "Hey, like we represent Jon Batiste. Would you be interested in playing this show with him in New York City and then also at the Newport Jazz Festival?" And I'm like, "What? Like, are you serious?" Absolutely. Because it's like I knew that John was about to take over this show. I knew that he was an incredibly gifted pianist. Outside of that, I didn't know much, but I was also just like, again, the opportunity, like, thank
Mm-hmm.
you, Jesus. Let me pay attention to this path, say yes, and then played the Newport Jazz Festival later that summer. Got an email from the Late Show team that was like, "Hey, we would like you to be in the fold of this band." And it was very surreal. The call was very surreal because it's like I didn't, I in kind of preparing to talk to you, I was listening to a couple different versions of the podcast, including like
Mm-hmm.
the one with Alan. And I feel like knowing Alan as well through my own thing, it's like there are people that know that it's like I'm gonna write songs from when they're young, or like I want to do this specific thing, and then it's like when it happens and that becomes their thing, it's a lot less like, oh well, like maybe the feeling of like I never knew I'd be able to do it at this level. Maybe that's a feeling, but the idea of like I'm a songwriter and that's how I make my life, that was never a question for me.
Right.
I didn't know. I didn't know what this life in music was going to be. I didn't know if it was going to be like I'm only in this band or like I'm doing this. It was just like, and so to get a call and be like, "Yo, like, do you want to be in a house band for for the Late Show, playing with some of the greatest musicians in the world that would also become your dear friends, but also like just a very specific gig through which, like, if you look at the history of like late night, a very small group of people make up the people that have been in a house band at a Late Show ever." So it's like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like I was in Talmadge, Ohio being like, I'm going to move to New York and be in a TV band.
Right.
But
Right. Of course.
so when that call came, it was like, all right, I mean, this is an opportunity. And like now that has kind of been one of the central pillars of my life for the past 10 years. And it's like, there's no way that I would have ever expected that. And so it was a very surreal call to get. And when I think back on it, it's like completely unexpected. but the things that it has led to, the people that I have met through that, and the opportunities that have come up because of that. Like this summer, I'm, the Huntertones horn section is doing dates with the
Yeah.
band Lake Street Dive. And that
Yeah,
was
it's
a connection
amazing,
that
man.
happened through, Jon Batiste. Eventually I met Rachel Price through them. And it's just like so many of these things happened because I'm in the fold at this thing that I never would have imagined even being on my radar. And I think that's another testament to just like what it is to move through life with faith of like not necessarily knowing exactly what the next step is, but knowing, kind of being open to it, and knowing what, I want to do. Like, I think, trying to say it the right way, what has been clear to me, what I have known and recognized is like, I am somebody that loves to be in front of people. I love to the joy and the gratitude that I experience. It's not even like I want to, it's like I need to like put that outside of myself for other people to experience. And it's like, that is the thing that it is like, that's what I want to do. That is what I want to do with my life. And the vehicles through which I have gotten to do that have all been relatively unexpected, but it's created this life that I'm extremely grateful for. And even now it's like, I'm still learning what the next versions of that are going to be, whether it be like, like with night service, with whatever other music and experience is going to come forth from my own artistry. But yeah, just really paying attention to what the next steps are and should be.
Yeah. It's so awesome, man. And you deserve everything that has come and will continue to come. And I wonder if, because I've been talking to a lot of other artists and at all sorts of different levels, and it feels like it doesn't really get easier. It almost kind of gets different, right? Like your stress and your anxiety and the pressure that you're put in now.
Yes.
When you were playing as a kid, when you were in church and you were playing, you were singing, you were doing the things. These were just hobbies, right? These were things that you just loved, that you felt connected to. But then when you add the occupational title to it, when you add commerce to this whole thing, you add like, this is like my livelihood, this is what I have to do.
Yeah.
It sometimes, I think, for a lot of artists, kind of like dilutes the joy of just like the thing that they get to do, rather than like, well, this is now what I have to do. And I've felt that myself in certain acting experiences that I've had, where I've shown up and I've been like, well, I'm doing this now because I kind of have to do it, because it's part of what I'm doing. I'm grateful, no doubt, but I'm also like, it's just that it shifts your perspective of the art that you're doing. And I wonder if you, as you grow and you continue to grow, like, how do you navigate like the difficulty of that pressure and what that does for you? And does it get more challenging as you grow, or does it like get easy? I don't know. Like, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's a great, like, the idea of, does it get more challenging? Does it get easier? Or this kind of very universal journey of the artist or the creative, where it starts, there's no pressure, there's no responsibility, there's no weight on it to like make money to provide for yourself or others. It's just like doing this thing in school band or playing at church because it's fun, or like playing with your family and your cousins. And then you get older and it becomes like, oh, well, like I want to approach the music seriously because I want to reach a certain level, because, I want to be great at this. And so you like practice 5-6 hours a day, and you, that isn't all necessarily fun, but what it allows you to get to on the instrument or in the art or in the craft is the fun part. So there's a little bit of sacrifice to get to that. And then you get older. As I've gotten older, Man, I've been really fortunate in that as a musician, there are a lot of musicians who have spent a lot more time doing gigs that feel like it is like, well, even though this is like a punch the clock type thing, I need to do this to pay the bills. And so then I can do the stuff that maybe isn't making as much money for fun, but I have all of this stuff that I do more of, the private corporate gigs or the wedding bands. It's like I have done some of that like when I first moved to New York, but I've been very blessed, man. Like the first band that I was touring with full scale, I was on a tour bus. And it's like when I was in college at the time, it's like I wasn't relative to where I'm at in my career. It's like it wasn't like I was making, you know, I wasn't at a certain point, but it was like I was extremely fortunate to have a situation like that to where I moved to New York. It was like, okay, I'm going to take this gig here and there because I have to, but I have some money saved up to where I don't necessarily have to do too much of that. So I've been really fortunate in that way. But even like though a lot of the music that I've been able to make has been with artists that I really enjoy making music with, there definitely has been like the longer I've done it, the longer I've, lived in a city like New York, there becomes a pressure or a responsibility. So it's like, even though I love this, it's like, I got to fill the calendar, or like the Late Show is an amazing opportunity, but it's like a full-time job. We're there like 40 weeks a year, regular schedule. And again, it's an amazing thing to be a part of, but it's like, outside of the Late Show, I still, perform obviously like my own music, touring with O.A.R, touring with all these bands because I really enjoy doing it, but because I also always have kind of like an eye on the future where I'm like, well, when the show is done, you still are going to, your career is very much still going to be happening. And so you need to be thinking about, what's next. And so for me, a lot of the pressure, it's like not just necessarily like, all right, well, you got to do these things to be able to pay the bills or like have the type of life that you want to be able to have. It's more so like, Kenyatta Beasley, who was the first like my college trumpet instructor, who's a dear friend now, incredible musician, incredible human being. Like one of the first things he said to me in a lesson, and which has stayed with me forever, is like, hey man, no gig lasts forever. And it's like, man, kid, whatever I was, like 20-year-old kid hearing that. And it's like, I've been so fortunate to have an amazing opportunities like with bands across my career. But it's like an awareness that it is like at some point, those things are going to, if not end, kind of like slow down. And so you always have to kind of have the idea of what is next, or at least kind of have the options that can then turn into what the next thing is. So that for me is where a lot of the pressure has come from as I've gotten older. And it's like, I've really worked to always kind of be present in the joy of whatever the music is that I am making. Like whenever, like in all situations. And it is difficult sometimes. I think especially like in a situation like the Late Show, the longer you've been there, it's this amazing environment, but it's like, again, it's like a TV show that is like a different version of the same thing every night. Even being on tour is like amazing, but the longer you do it, the more it feels like the monotony kind of sets in, and you have to work harder to be like, look, man, to not look at it as like, all right, another night, another show. It's like, bro, you are, 15 years into your career as a professional musician, and you're getting to do this for this many people with these kinds of people in this setting, and really just like really working to make that the focus instead of like, all right, man, well, you've been at the Late Show for, 9 years now, and it's
Right.
like it's amazing, but also like you got to have your eye on what's next. And when this is done, like you don't. It's like really trying not to worry about those things, but trusting that like again, like the path as it is continued to be made clear will continue to be made clear as long as I am working to create opportunities, but also just paying attention to where those opportunities come from. And
Right.
I do think it's just really been important for me to, and it's like man, it's like working out, bro. The older you get, the harder it is to like maintain certain aspects. It's like
Yeah.
the longer I've been doing it, there are times where it is harder to not just like be at the late show and like, all right, well, today I'm just kind of like, we're playing a bunch of stuff I know, I'm just going to dial it
Right.
in. And it's like trying to step outside of myself and be like, no, man, like be present, find a way to like, you know, play in a way that will challenge yourself, or like to be on tour playing a version of the same music and it's like, nah, man, make it different. Or no, like look at this audience and like understand how much joy they're getting and like let that revive you and like realize that every night it is a new experience, even if it feels the same for
Yeah.
you. Really trying to latch on to things like that so that that initial joy that came from playing in the garage band or playing at church or just, you know, playing with friends early on when it didn't matter never goes away, even when it feels like the stakes and responsibilities do grow as you kind of get older.
Yeah, man. I mean, your bar just continues to get set higher and higher and higher, and it's so fascinating how your perspective for where you're at when you're there kind of shifts along with that measuring stick, right? Like you're just continuing to like move the flagpole down the field, and you get farther. And I talk to Alan a lot of times because, you know, I actually had a long conversation with him recently where I felt like I was in the best place of my life professionally. Things were really happening. I was doing a lot of things creatively. I was really taking control of my own creative life, and great things were really happening. But somehow I felt the most lost that I had ever felt. And it was weird how like those two things like were totally connected to one another. And
Right.
it's like, because every time I do something that levels me up, now I'm leveled up, and it's almost like you're in a video game. And if you fall back down, you got to like start over. You're just like, wait, I can't go below this. I have
Right.
to like, I have to do something now that's better than that. And
Right.
then better than that.
Right.
And you don't have to do anything, right?
Right.
Like that's the tricky thing about this whole experience is that I think I'm convinced with my own situation that like it has to be like this continuous evolution of like moving forward and growth. And what does that look like if I'm not making more money, if I'm not getting like more recognition, if I'm not doing these things that we're conditioned to believe that like shows progress? But like we don't think about like, well, what does my work-life balance look like? And like when I'm not working, in fact, like if I pull this all away and I just go out and like spend a full day with my partner having a picnic, we don't talk about art at all, but we just enjoy each other's company. Like, what does that look like? How is my progress there? And it's so convoluted and hard to really like make the most sense of when you're moving in that direction. And to hear you talk about, you know, being on a show like, you know, Stephen Colbert for 9 years, it's like, you look at young Jon and you're like, oh my God, man. I can't believe it. This is incredible. Look at him. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Right. But now, you know, and it's not to say that you have any like lack of gratitude for that experience, but you do have days, you must, where you're just like, you know, okay, here, you know, this is my job and I'm just, you know, showing up and doing my job again.
Yeah.
And
man. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just wild because your reference for doing that now is like you're set in that space. You've been doing it.
Right.
And you've been in arenas, you know, to sold out shows with people screaming and going crazy. So your stimulation like meter too is just like, you know, crazy.
Right.
And your energy and like you're bringing your energy. And so like a day without those things is like, how do you navigate that, like the monotonies of life when you're just like, oh, I got nothing to do today,
Yeah.
and nobody, like, do you find that you like need to get stimulated somehow? Do you like need to go make some content or like feel that thing? Like, how do you get around that stuff?
Man, and I will speak to what you were saying about like just the idea of, feeling. I definitely feel, not have felt, I feel the pressure or the desire in my own ambition, but also just from this creative world to, it's like I want my music to reach more people. I want,
Hmm.
to have a
Of course.
greater impact. I want to, when it's like when you make a certain amount of money and like you go back, whatever that is, it feels like a loss, feels like an L. And it's like, oh, so I
Mm-hmm.
need to keep the productivity happening. And I mean, as grateful as I am for my life and my journey and everything that has happened on the music side of things, the people I've been able to meet, I have sacrificed like, you know, relationships in a way that has felt relatively devastating because of an inability to like prioritize that side of life. And
Mm.
that is something that I feel like I want to grow in the same way that I've pushed myself to grow as a musician and as an artist. I want to grow in the idea of like, look, man, if you love this person or you love these people, make time for that in the same way that you're making time for your artistry. Because it's like a career, especially when you love what you do or it's something that you feel like is your passion and your purpose, is a wonderful thing. But like the people in your life at the end of the day who love you and that you love, like that is kind of really what life is. A huge part
Yeah.
of the meaning of it is community, a relationship. And having sacrificed relationships, it's like at some point, or a lot of, there are just points where it's like, I'm experiencing all these amazing things, but then there's a piece of, there is like a piece that all of that stuff can't touch. It doesn't like satisfy. And I think that I'm trying to grow and really learn and teach, like teach myself, but kind of like push myself to, prioritize community, prioritize the people in your life that you love. I want to grow in that way. I think it's something that will be a continuous process, but I'm working on that. And then kind of just to the other thing that you were saying in terms of like, do you need that stimulus? Does it feel like on the days where there isn't a show or there isn't like, like a in front of a bunch of people or like some kind of session, do I feel like I need to do that? I I feel like I I appreciate downtime, and there are times where it feels like it's like, oh, I should be being productive right now
Hmm.
because I have this space. I do feel like I've gotten a lot better at that and kind of just letting that time be for kind of, like recovery or like to restore whatever needs to be restored. Um, I feel like I do really crave not just like the adulation of like fans screaming, but just like the experience of like playing on a stage with other people, in front of people, or just like music making. It's like I love the feeling of it. And so like I when it's not happening, or like if there are days that are chill, I definitely am like, 2 or 3 days without playing some sort of show, I'm like, man, like what's happening? Like I need to get back into my vibe. And I think a part of
Yeah.
that is just because it's such an integral part of who I am, but another piece of it is like I think there is work to be done to be able to be like, all right, you are a whole person outside of an artist, and like
Hmm.
you can like the desire to feed that part of yourself. I would like for the desire to feed the non-artist or non-creative or non-performer part of myself to be just as strong as the desire to create or the desire to perform, because I
Yeah.
think that like it's integral to having like kind of a really well balanced life to kind of get to that point. I will just say openly, I don't think that I am where I want to be in
Mm.
there in that aspect, but I feel like I've recognized that I do want to be somebody who is feeding their relationships and their life outside of the creative as
Yeah.
much as I am feeding that part of my life as well.
It's awesome, man. Yeah, it's so complicated, man. It's like the challenge of the work we do, you know,
yeah,
as an artist, it's or anybody, man. It's relative to anybody who just like cares enough about what they do and
yes,
loves what they do so strongly.
right,
And I actually had a pretty big revelation the other day in therapy because I was talking to her and I was just saying, I feel like I'm going to get everything I ever wanted in my life, but I'm not going to have anybody to share it with by the time I get there.
wow,
And I just like, because, you know, what you were just talking about a little bit ago, just about like having sacrificed so much to
yeah,
get to this space and to do this thing. And like, yes, there are so many wonderful reflections from like what you've been able to accomplish as a part of those sacrifices. But when you spend enough time taking 10 steps back and looking at, you know, some of the relationships that have been lost because of
yep,
this, or, you know, things that you may have, like, you've almost forgot about. Oh my God, I forgot that, like, that thing happened, you know, or this thing, like I missed out on that family vacation because I was here doing this thing, or that wedding that I wasn't a part of. All these moments that you have in life that you get to be a part of, you know.
right,
I think definitely for me, I've been like, oh, I get to be a part of like being on this set and being a part of that film and that TV show or this thing. You get to be a part of those things, and wow, look at my resume of life.
right,
Like, ah, look at this. But you know, the epiphany that I had was really like kind of forecasting the end of my life, and sitting on my deathbed and being like, what am I gonna reflect on in those moments? Is it gonna be the TV shows that I was on, and the jobs that I had, and like, oh, look at all these like cool actors that I had got to work with?
right,
Or is it going to be the relationships that I was able to foster through my life,
yeah,
and the experiences that I was able to have with the people that I love through, hopefully, the art that I was able to cultivate? And like finding that balance with both of those things is kind of like the challenge for me at this point in my life. And I think it's probably common for most of us that are in this space. You know, it's just like, how do we
yeah,
find this work-life balance when we love the thing we're doing so much? My mom calls me sometimes. She's like, I'm just worried about you. I'm worried you're just like working way too hard. And I'm like, no, but mom, but like, you don't understand, because I love the
right,
thing that I'm working so hard towards.
right,
It's like, geez, excuse me.
okay.
She's like, you know, I get it. I understand that you love it. I see that.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean I'm not still worried that like you're not taking time to be a person. You know,
Yeah,
ironically, as an actor, I'm like trying to, you know, uh, study and understand the human condition as expansively as I possibly can. But ironically, I am forgetting to be a person so often because I'm just so focused on becoming that thing. And it's just
yes,
like, whoa, maybe that's part of the reason why I haven't arrived at where I'm trying to get to yet. And once I like let go of all of this, I'll be able to, you know.
yeah,
Surrendering has been at top of mind a lot lately too for me. And
yeah. I mean,
just like, gosh, man, I put so much pressure on myself to be this thing that I expect myself to be. And when I recognize that like I am that, whether or not I try so hard, and like it's not really like in my control regardless, like life is going to happen and the world is going to keep spinning, and like, you
yeah,
know, nobody's sitting around like waiting for me to put out my social media content. Nobody's like, oh, it's 12 o'clock,
right,
where's Julian? You know,
right,
like nobody's paying attention.
right, right,
But you know, I do want to have impact like you. I want to be able to reach people. I want to be able to like, you know, communicate and move people and like connect with more people. And uh I just feel grateful that at this point in my life, I have a community that's filled with people like yourself, that I get to come and experience you. And, we get to have these conversations and try to like navigate this space, because like I do feel so grateful that I get to like participate in like what you're able to give to the world. But I really hope that I can reciprocate in a certain way as a friend and as just a person in your life, because I think for all of my artist friends, like you need to receive that back. You need to get that back, because you're giving a lot of love.
Yeah.
You're giving a lot of energy. You're doing a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just feels like it doesn't get reciprocated. It's like because it's kind of hard to even explain, because it's like, well, no, you're like, everybody praises you, everybody loves you, you're on stage and you're
Right.
being clapped. But like, there's a lot of thanklessness to this stuff that the stuff that people don't see.
I mean, it's thanklessness, and this just like you are giving kind of the most vulnerable version of yourself when you're up on a stage, both emotionally, physically, like, and when you do it consistently, regardless, like the what you feel when people cheer and celebrate that is one thing. I think what you feel when people are able to share their experience of like, that filled me up and brought me joy, or that made me feel closer to God, or like that made me feel people like, man, like that made me feel close to my mom who has been dead for 10 years. Like that fills you up in a certain way, but it's like exhausting, man. And so outside of that space, exactly what you're saying, it's really crucial to have, friends, partners, whatever it is, that are able to kind of refill the tank in a way that is like not of the same currency, right? It's not this like massive like thing of like art or like your acting or like my music. It's just like people that you're able to just like confide in and talk to, and to just enjoy each other's company, and to be vulnerable with in a way that is like incredibly restorative. And it's like, it's true. Like it's the idea, hearing you talk about your mom saying that, and you're like, man, no, but you don't get it, because I love what I do. And it's like, if anything, what I have learned is that like, because I love what I do, when I do it, it takes way more out of me. Which, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, because of how much you're putting into it when you do it. If I don't, and I don't know, like I've professionally, I've only done this thing that I do feel like I enjoy doing, but it's like, in moments, even non-professionally, if I'm doing something that I don't necessarily want to be doing or connect with, but doing it because it needs to be done, I'm able to withhold a certain amount of energy from the thing and still do the task, versus like, because I love what I am doing, I can't withhold that. And so by the time you are done giving it, it's like you're completely depleted in a way that is like, it's crucial to be able to fill that back up with people who love you and care about you, whether you play the best show of your life or whether you completely just forgot all the words and messed up every song. It's like, you need the people in your life filling you up where that isn't a part of the equation. I think that's crucial.
Right. I think it's crucial too to, to not just have people supporting your art, but like supporting your well-being as well.
Yes.
Because I think people on the outside will get confused, because they're like, well, look, I'm like showing up to their shows, and that's great. Like, that's wonderful. And it's not like, oh, we need stuff, but I think like just as human beings, we need to show up for each other outside of, because it's very easy to misinterpret what kind of support you're giving to, especially an artist like yourself. Right. It's just like, well, I bought your album. Well, I did this. And it's just like, I totally appreciate that. And thank you so much for doing that. But like, ultimately, I think it's really important to have a really solid community of people who are like, hey man, how are you really doing? Like, how's your heart? How's your spirit? You know, like,
Yeah.
how's your energy? You okay? You want to come over for dinner? We'll make a big pot of mac and cheese and just like sit here and like, we don't even have to talk. You know,
We
like
should
we can just
we
like
should
eat.
we should actually
And
do this, by the way. Like, you said
I
that, and I was
know.
like, I actually want to come to your house and make a huge pot of mac and cheese and just hang out. I would love that.
Me too, man. And I know how like, well, I know how difficult we make it.
Of
You know,
course.
not just you and
Right.
me, but just like everybody, especially in
Right.
New York. We're just like
Right.
driven and going and making things happen and fucking doing this and doing that and doing this. And it's always like, yeah, man, like we should really hang, you know, we should really make something happen. And then, you know, 7 months later, we're like, we see each other again. We're like, hey, man, we should definitely hang, you know. And
Right.
it is hard. It is hard. I'm not denying that, because we are all busy. We all do have wild lives, but it's not as hard as we're making it. And I do think that there's like a lot of uh, a lot of uh, like joy and recovery and like rehab that can come from just like getting together and like spending time just like really checking in on one another and
Yeah.
being there for each other in a way that's not just like showing up for a concert, you know,
Right.
or like being there.
Right.
Cause like that's I feel so privileged to have friends that I can support because I actually like it. Not
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh, I'm going to John's show tonight because like, you know, I'm just like, you know, helping John out because he, you know,
Right.
probably needs the help. It's like, no, I'm
Right. Right.
going because like I need the help. Like this is going to be great. But like you're giving to me in that. I'm not giving to you by showing up to your show. You're giving to me by me showing up to your show.
Yeah.
And so I just want to be able to reciprocate that, man, to all my friends who are like giving me something like that.
Mm.
And, you know, just expand our friendship, man, and just like have some laughs and enjoy each other's company, because I just think that's important, man, just to like keep that work-life balance, you know, moving in a direction that feels like it's not just taken from us all the time.
It's essential,
And
man. It is an
it's
essential
essential.
thing.
And yeah, man, I just want you to know like how grateful I am for you being in my life, despite the amount of time we spend or don't spend together since the moment that I met you when I saw you playing with Alan way back in the day. And just like the energy that you were able to bring to that stage and to like that show specifically, and then like everything you've done since then that I've been able to witness, it's really brought me like so much love into my heart that like wasn't there prior to it. And then getting to see and witness night service really just like just solidified my love for you in a way that like it actually transcended that and made me realize like, whoa, I don't just like appreciate and love John and what he does, but like I actually am more of a whole person for having experienced what he's able to bring to my life. And when you are able to have a, just a human being do that to you and imprint something that of that magnitude into your life,
Mm.
it's like it almost feels like it's my responsibility to like try to pay it back. And not that I like owe you anything or that you expect anything from me, but I feel like let me be somebody in your life as well to give back however I can, to make you hopefully feel a fraction of what you've been able to make me feel, man. Because it's like it's truly, truly like something remarkable, and I hope that everybody at some point gets to witness what you do and what you bring. But I hope they also make you a pot of mac and cheese at the end of the day and get to
I
spend
mean,
quality time with you and like, you know, be a person with you at the same time.
man, I really appreciate you, man. I really appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you as a human being. And I feel like
Yeah.
it's right. Life has been what it has been, and I know we haven't. The amount of time that we've actually got to hang has been limited, but I I would love to be able to hang in that way, and like let's just make the time, man. And I
Let's
do
do it.
like yes, but I appreciate you. I appreciate this conversation, man. I feel like getting to speak with you in this way and to kind of talk has been really, really wonderful thing. But make no mistake, bro, I will eat 75% of that pot of mac and cheese, bro. Like, it's going down. It's going down.
All right, man. I'm holding you to it. I'm holding you to it, baby. Come on.
Awesome. Let's do
Um,
it.
John, you're such a legend, man. The Huntertones are going out on the road?
Yeah, man. I'm kind of just consistently on the road this
Yeah.
summer between like
How do you
Huntertones has
do that
been out.
with the show? Is the show off right now?
Yeah, so we have I do a lot of weekend warrior stuff where I'll like go Friday, Saturday, Sunday and then come back. But also
Wow.
the show is off for about like a lot of weeks during the summer. Like summer is the time where we get the most amount of time off from the show. So I kind of take those weeks off and try to divvy them in the best way between O.A.R, Huntertones this summer with Lake Street Dive as well.
That's be fun.
So it's definitely fun. Like to what we were talking about earlier, it's like it is the older, like neither of us are old, but the older we get, the harder it is to sustain like that type of lifestyle. So like
Right.
that's kind of another piece of the next phase of my life is trying to just find balance in terms of like, yo, man, as much as you want to be out with all of these different projects, it's like figuring out how to balance it a little better, making time for my own project, but also just making time to like just stay at home sometimes. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of like Huntertones put out a new album this year. We're touring that through the end of the year. It's a lot of weekend stuff with them as well. The O.A.R summer tour, my first date on that is actually coming up this weekend, and I'll be out with them through September. And then the back half of the year, we'll be back pretty consistently at the Late Show. I'm looking forward to the back half of the year because I'll be able to get night service happening back in New York because I'm gone every weekend this summer. So I haven't really been able to do it in town, but excited to, get that happening. I'm actually doing 2 big shows with night service back in Ohio, kind of like a mini homecoming tour in November. So It's like in Columbus where I went to school, as well as like Akron where I grew up. So I'm really looking forward to those ones as well.
Nice, man. That's awesome. Well, if you haven't heard Huntertones, go blast them all day, all night, every day, every night. And then check out Night Service too, because it's so uplifting and just, it's the best. We have the vinyl here. And so we've just been like letting it cruise. Dude. It's been awesome, man. I'll definitely come see you at some of the shows. I'm sure you're playing at some places out here in New York, right?
Dude, absolutely. Come hang. I mean, dude, you open invite, whatever band, whatever project, come through, man.
Awesome. John, you're a legend, man. I love you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. Keep taking care of your mental well-being and your spirit, because the world needs more of it, man. We need to like have more of you and your soul brought into this world now more than ever. So please, like, keep taking care of yourself the way that I think you already are, so you can keep giving yourself to the world and the world can keep receiving you. And let me pay you back in a nice little mac and cheese date.
Absolutely. Oh my God. You are the legend, man. Thank you for having me, man. Such a joy to get to talk to you. And yeah, bro, we'll hang soon.
All right, brother. Yeah, Johnny Lamps. What a gangster. Love that guy. What a dude. What a dude. Don't you just admire people who really have the gusto to just keep it moving and to like keep practicing and keep training? Like nobody just has this thing. Like I used to think that some friends were just inherently talented. I used to just think like, oh, like they just have that thing. They're born with it. But everybody has to practice. Maybe some people have some certain inherent skills that are better than others, but like nobody just gets a career handed into their lap. Like even if you're like a Nepo baby, you still have to be good, right? Like I'm a little bit on the fence with the whole situation. Like, I get it. I'm an actor. I want jobs, but like, you have to work your ass off no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. Yes, maybe some doors might be open to you, but despite any of the opportunities that come your way, you got to be good. You got to deliver the goods. And not that Jon is a Nepo person by any means. He's not. But he definitely delivers the goods. And that comes from disciplined practice and a lifetime of hard work. So I really appreciate him being on the pod. Guys, if you haven't already checked out my Patreon page, that is where I'm able to continue to produce this podcast because it helps support me financially. It helps support all of the time and energy that it takes to kind of like edit these videos and make this podcast continue happening, parse out the time to get these guests. It's a really cool place. I'm excited to be there. I'm trying to put new content up there, whether they're exclusive podcasts or films that I have made, or scripts, or audition tapes, or other podcasts that I've done with people that aren't public, puppet shows. I'm doing all sorts of things on there, and I would love it if you could go check it out. It is at patreon.com/the precipice of delusion. You can join for just $5 a month, and a little goes a long ways, guys. I am able to continue to make this thing happen and not get burnt out because I'm essentially like paying more money to make it happen. So as always, like, share, comment, subscribe, follow, do all those things. It really goes a long ways, guys. Just spread the word, because if you like this podcast, I want you to tell other people about it. So yeah, that's all, guys. Check out the Precipice of Delusion on Patreon at patreon.com/the precipice of delusion. Become a member, get the perks in there. Support me. I need your support. And I will see you guys next week. I love you so much. Thanks for being with me. Until next time. Ta-ta. Now that's what I'm talking about.